Well, I listened to Tea Talk, Sarah Ferguson's new podcast with Sarah Thompson. And I've got to say, I felt like I needed something stronger than tea by the time I waded through that 40 minutes. Now, they were very clear. They sort of tried to preempt any criticism because they're all about how the reaction to the podcast, haters are going to hate and kindness is a superpower. And they sort of tied our hands that we wouldn't be able to say anything nasty without coming across as being a hater. But I don't think what I am saying in the review of this podcast is actually hate. I think it's good advice. Now, if I was going to produce this podcast, I don't know who was producing it, but they are clearly inexperienced. Because if you're going to put up that first episode, you need to have recorded 3 or 4 that never went to air, and then you put up number 5 or you put up number 4, because it just reeked of inexperience, it reeked of nervousness, it was awkward, they didn't have any flow, they didn't know when to stop talking and when to start talking. It was just awkward. And the nerves made them babble on, particularly Sarah Ferguson. I mean, she just babbled on all the time, and it was all about me. More than me gain goes on in her podcast. Now, you've heard of people humble bragging. Well, Sarah humble victimizes herself because she tells us that she's not a victim. She tells us that she's not playing the victim while she's constantly giving us sad stories about what a victim she is. And the whole podcast was about her bravery to turn up to do this podcast. She rang Sarah Thompson the night before and said that, she had second thoughts because she saw nasty headlines. I think it was probably about that $19 million lawsuit that I did that little vid on for you about. And she was, feeling like people were judging her. Well, yes. And, she said, well, I hesitated to stick my head up above the parapet because I knew I might come under heavy fire. I'm paraphrasing, but, it was very Red Baron sort of analogies. And so she's really good at sort of painting her lack of confidence and lack of self-esteem. And then she then goes on and builds a hero narrative, but she's telling the tale. So it's always, she's so put down and she's so unconfident and she's so lacking. And then she always says, but I went on for the sake of everybody and the show must go on and I turned up and yes, I'm such a hero. So she paints the hero narrative after she's painted the victim narrative. So it's like a humble victim hero narrative. Now, when the podcast first opened up, she introduces herself, and that was even a little bit of a wincing moment because she said she's Sarah and she's a mother and she's a granny, and that was all going well. I thought, that's nice, and she's really good. But then she had to clunk it in with, and I'm lucky enough to be a duchess. Well, thanks, Sarah. I mean, we knew, and you didn't have to make sure you got it in there in the first minute. Sarah Thompson was very, very fawning. Now, it would have come across a little bit better if they had sort of played it that they were equals and that they were just two friends genuinely having a conversation. But Sarah Thompson doesn't come across that way. She treats her like a duchess. She's a little bit subservient. She's a little bit fawning. And she goes into these sort of complimentary rants along the lines of, this is the note I made, I really respect and admire you and you're brilliant and you're so creative and you're one of the funniest people I've ever met and no, you're so brave and you're so inspirational and you're also, And you could tell when she was going to go into this. And I just had to turn it off. Like when the second one started, I just had to turn it off. It was too distressing. It was just, I knew it was coming. And Sarah said she had a rule book, and in her rule book are values, loyalty, kindness, integrity, and learning. And she's 63, and she's still talking about her lack of confidence, and the damage done to her implied by her childhood. And look, there comes a point at 63 where your sad story of your childhood does not excuse your behavior anymore. It helps us to understand and it helps us to put it into context. But we have understood and put it in context too many times. There's been too many disasters. There's been too many large-scale embarrassments. There's been too many grabs for cash that are unsavory and a little bit on the nose. And, reputable papers now are saying that Sarah Ferguson had more to do with Jeffrey Epstein than she made out, that he paid out more of her debt than the original £17,000 that we were told, and that she possibly, it's alleged, visited Jeffrey Epstein after his conviction. So don't preach to us about rule books and values, Sarah. So they said that kindness is a superpower, and I would have to summon my superpowers right now. I'm going to summon them. I'm going to summon them. And the next 5 seconds are going to be kind about this podcast. I like Sarah Thompson. I really did like Sarah Thompson. I actually would like to hear Sarah Thompson do a podcast on her own and interview people, because she actually asked Fergie some questions, and it was at that point that it became interesting. She asked Fergie what her first job was, and Fergie said it was interesting. She said she went over to California and she was working in a strudel house, and an interesting little story was that when she came into her first disaster with the royal family and she was receiving bad press, a couple reached out to her, wrote to her and said that she served them in the strudel house when she was an 18-year-old. And they said, we just want you to know how incredibly kind you were to us and what a lovely person we thought you were. And that she cherished that letter, and she actually kept in touch with that couple for the next 30 years. So I thought that was a lovely and interesting story. But Sarah Thompson drew that out of her with a pertinent question. And Sarah Thompson was interesting to me. I actually wanted to hear more about her. She's an entrepreneur. She's built several successful businesses. And she was sort of kept down and a bit silenced by Sarah, because Sarah just would not shut up. So it wasn't an equal distribution of, and Sarah never, and when Sarah Ferguson talked about Sarah Thompson, she didn't sort of draw out anything interesting about her. She just went into a rant compliment fest on her. And it was just like, oh, look, let us make up our own minds. Stop telling us by telling each other how wonderful you are. It's just groaning. It's just, see, I can't maintain the superpower of kindness. I can't do it. It's disappeared already. Oh, and I must say that all of your comments about the podcast photo I thought were absolutely hilarious, because the podcast photo has been airbrushed, let's say. It's look, she's either had a lot of work done before they took the photo, or she's had a major chemical peel. I'm talking a major chemical peel. She would have to be out of action for at least 3 months, I think, for a chemical peel to be that effective. Other than that, it's been photoshopped to death. And again, she's 63. I mean, come on. Show some wrinkles. Show some freckles. It's okay. You're 63. It's all right. We know. Believe me, we all know, Actually, I wouldn't mind getting hold of her filter and putting it on this video. I'd look about 20, I reckon, with that filter. I'd look fantastic. I don't use any filters on my videos. Wish I could, though. Wish I could. Okay. So we'll go on. You could hear them drinking tea and eating ginger biscuits. Was a little off-putting. Hearing them chew. But, oh yes, she tells a story about shrinking, Alice in Wonderland shrinking herself down to fit in the hole, and the Cheshire Cat, and she does a Cheshire Cat voice, and that was when she said about putting her head above the parapet and how she shrunk herself down, and oh, come on, no more. Anyway, let me know what you think. If you haven't subscribed, could I ask you to please subscribe? If you enjoyed this video, if you like the vintage view, or you tune in sometimes, could you give me a like and a subscribe? I'd really appreciate it. And I'll be back again tomorrow, and I can't wait. See you then. Bye.